Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming to tonight's meeting about the MassDOT Capital Investment Plan. We're just gonna give folks another little bit to join and then we'll get started. All right, well, good evening, everyone, and thanks for being here. My name is Michelle Scott. I'm the Manager of Capital Planning at the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. And tonight we'll be discussing the draft MassDOT 2024 through 28 Capital Investment Plan, or CIP for short. To get things started, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Chris Clem, who will review the meeting procedures.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Clem, and I'm one of the MassDOT producers this evening, alongside Raisa Kwame, who will help facilitate the question and answer session. Before we dive into the presentation, we'll just take a quick minute to review some Zoom controls. On the bottom of your screen, you will find your audio settings. Your microphones are muted during the meeting, but you will have the opportunity to speak during the question and comment session at the end of the presentation by using the raised hand function to indicate that you wish to speak. You can also rename yourself by clicking the participant button, finding your name, and then clicking rename. If you have questions or comments at any time during the presentation, you can put them in the chat box and we will address them at the end of the presentation during the question and comment session. If you need to attend the meeting by phone, you can do so by dialing 1-305-224-1968 and entering meeting ID 824-3279-5955. You may also view live closed captioning generated by Zoom by selecting the CC icon at the bottom of your screen. And if you're having any technology troubles throughout the meeting, please request help through the chat or call the number on the right side of your screen. That is 857-702-3706. This virtual public meeting will be recorded. Massachusetts Department of Transportation may choose to retain and distribute the video, still images, audio, and/or chat transcript. By continuing attendance with this virtual public meeting, you are consenting to participate in a recorded event. If you are not comfortable being recorded, please turn your camera off, keep your microphone muted, and refrain from chatting in the transcript box. If you prefer to excuse yourself from the meeting, you can find all the materials online at www.mass.gov/CIP. Other important notes, please note that you are automatically muted upon entering the meeting. The meeting will be open to questions and answers and comments at the end of the formal presentation. And again, if you are having any trouble with the technology during the presentation, please request support using the Zoom chat function or call 857-702-3706. All questions and comments are welcome and appreciated. However, we do ask that you refrain from any disrespectful comments. And I will now hand the presentation back to Michelle. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of the CIP related material we'll be covering tonight. First, we'll hear a quick welcome from our host this evening, a very gracious host, the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization. Next, I'll give an overview of what the Capital Investment Plan, or CIP for short, is and the approach we've taken to developing it. We'll talk a little bit about the relationship between the CIP and a related document, the State Transportation Improvement Program, and the role of MPOs and transportation planning organizations, or TPOs, in making up those two documents. I'll give an overview of the planned spending and funding sources for the CIP and highlight some selected investments specific for the Boston region. Then I'll go over how you can explore the CIP, including the structure of our document and the overall structure of our engagement process and the schedule for that. And then finally, we're really looking forward to hearing your feedback on this draft plan and what your comments are about the proposed investments. So at this point, I'd like to turn things over to Ethan LaPointe from the Boston Region MPO to give a few words of welcome.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and good evening, everybody. My name is Ethan LaPointe. I am the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP Manager, for the Boston Region MPO, and it's 97 cities and towns within that region. I'm joined this evening by my colleague Logan Casey, who is also a capital programming planner with the Boston Region MPO. The MPO is happy to work jointly with the Massachusetts Department of Transportation to develop the TIP each year in tandem with the capital investment plan to reflect capital investments across the 97 cities and towns of the region. The regional TIP, which feeds into the CIP, is anticipated to be endorsed and finalized on Thursday, June 1st at an MPO board meeting, which can be virtually attended at 10 a.m. with the longer term MPO's long-range transportation plan forthcoming and anticipated for public comment on June 15th. So stay tuned for that, but for now, I will turn it back over to Michelle to discuss the CIP. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks so much, Ethan. All right, moving ahead to an overview of the CIP. So this is one of the key budget and policy documents from MassDOT. It is at its essence a fiscally constrained investment plan that directs state and federal funding to pay for the Commonwealth's capital expenditures related to transportation. So the CIP funds a host of different activities ranging from project planning, design, construction, and then ongoing maintenance of the network that we have for transportation. It's a rolling 5-year plan, which we update each year through a development process that revisits our plans for spending in the upcoming years. The CIP covers a range of different investment types, from roadways to bridges to separate bicycle and pedestrian facilities, transit investments, improvements to our airports, the rail network, and the registry of motor vehicles. The CIP, both in recent years and for this upcoming 24 through 28 CIP, is based around 3 major priorities: reliability, modernization, and expansion. These 3 core priorities go on to inform investment programs, which house specific projects. So just to talk a little bit more about those 3 priorities, which I'll be referring to throughout the presentation. First is reliability, which involves really maintaining and improving the condition of our transportation assets. Modernization goes the next step to make those transportation assets safer, to improve access, and to support growth and economic vitality. And finally, expansion is designed to increase the options we have for the ways that we can travel on our network, and incorporates extensions to that network overall. For example, expansion of the statewide bike network. So to complement that 3-tier CIP development framework, we have a series of strategic goals specifically for the 24 through 28 CIP. The first being safety, which is oriented towards improving safety for all users of the system and focused on adopting a holistic, safe system approach to improving safety on the network. The second is climate stewardship. This accounts both for investing in ways that decarbonize the system to reduce greenhouse gases and adapting infrastructure to make it more resilient in the face of climate change. Equity accounts for promoting investments that support expanding everyone's access to mobility and opportunities. And this also really influences how we try to engage people in the development of the CIP and in the investments that are included there. Want to make sure that as many people as possible can participate in this process. And finally, the fourth goal is responsible asset management, which involves identifying and prioritizing investments that'll preserve our system and make it so that it's more modern and more adaptable to new needs and new challenges. So as Ethan alluded to in his remarks, the CIP is developed alongside another 5-year plan, the State Transportation Improvement Program. And I'm going to kind of talk through the nested diagram that's shown on the right-hand part of the slide to indicate the relationship. So the State Transportation Improvement Program is made up of the transportation improvement programs that are produced by the metropolitan planning organizations and transportation planning organizations, which serve rural areas throughout Massachusetts. The TIPs and therefore the STIP are really focused on programming federal dollars for roadway and transit projects. And so this makes up about 10.8 billion for fiscal years 24 through 28 of what is expected to be an overall 15.4 billion CIP. So with these TIPs and STIPs as the core, the CIP includes some investments beyond that. Some of these are referring to that next circle up of other federally aided projects that may support our airports or the freight rail network. And then beyond that, transportation projects that are supported by other funding sources that are available to the Commonwealth. So this slide goes a little bit more into our relationship with the metropolitan planning organizations and rural TPOs that serve Massachusetts. These, of course, are policy and transportation decision-making bodies that oversee the spending of federal dollars for transportation within their respective regions. Their boards are made up of local and state officials, and they really have an important role in making sure that folks are engaged in the transportation decision-making process in the places where they live. So when developing their transportation improvement programs, which are 5-year documents, these comprise both the funding that's at the MPO's discretion, includes projects that they may select, projects that are selected by MassDOT, and then projects that are selected by the regional transit authorities that may operate in that region. And just for reference on the map on the slide here, you can see the different metropolitan planning organizations and transportation planning organizations that operate in Massachusetts. The MPOs are highlighted in blue and the TPOs are highlighted in black. Also, as Ethan alluded to, the MPOs and TPOs in the state have recently released for public comment or in the process of finalizing their 24 through 28 TIPs. You may have been involved in the process for that in your specific region. And again, these go on to comprise the STIP. A draft STIP is now out for public review. You can learn more about it on the mass.gov. And the comment period for this document is open through June 9th. So now to talk a little bit more about the different funding sources that support the CIP. We've talked about federal funding so far with respect to the STIP. Federal funding that contributes to the CIP and the STIP as well includes funding that comes from the USDOT to states by formula. These include funding that reimburses construction costs that come from the Federal Highway Administration, as well as funding from the Federal Transit, Aviation, and Railroad Administrations. In addition to these funds that come by formula, USDOT also offers a host of competitive discretionary grants. Should any of these funds be awarded to the Commonwealth, they are reflected in the CIP. In addition to these federal dollars, there's also a number of state sources. There's a state bond cap from general obligation bonds. These state bond cap dollars are used to match the funds that we receive from the federal government. There's also funding for specific transportation initiatives that may be supported by special obligation bonds. Examples of that are the recent Accelerated Bridge Program or the Rail Enhancement Program. MassDOT can also make use of tolls to support parts of the transportation network. There are tolls that are collected for the Metropolitan Highway System, the Western Turnpike, and the Tobin Bridge. And the toll revenues that come from that can support improvements on these 3 systems. And finally, other sources include kind of a grab bag of other things that support transportation in the Commonwealth. One example is the funding to support ongoing improvements to the Central Artery through the CARM or Central Artery Project Repair and Maintenance Trust Fund. So to talk just a little bit more about funding sources and their influences on the upcoming CIP, one major factor that shaped the development of recent CIPs, and definitely the one for 24 through 28, is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which was enacted in 2021. This authorizes the levels of funding that go into these federal formula funds that get passed to the states and state DOTs. These are incorporated, of course, into both the CIP and the STIP. The CIP reflects not only these amounts of federal funds, but also the state match. In addition to providing, in some cases, increased funding through existing federal formula programs, the BIL has also introduced a number of new formula programs to which the MassDOT is working to respond and develop plans for. For example, the 2024 through 28 CIP includes a resiliency program that's new, and this is designed to spend federal dollars coming through the brand new Promoting Resilient Operations for a Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation Program, also known as PROTECT. There's new funding available through the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, which is really designed to support expanded infrastructure for electric vehicle charging, particularly along interstates, and MassDOT has developed a NEVI deployment plan to support that. Finally, MassDOT's been working with the Executive Office for Climate and the Executive Office for Energy and Environmental Affairs to develop a strategy for spending new carbon reduction funding. Other ways the BIL is influencing the CIP, there's been more funding in recent years for bridge replacement and rehabilitation. You'll see this reflected in the 24 through 28 STIP and CIP as well, along with increased funding for FTA programs that support seniors and people with disabilities. Also, as I mentioned, with respect to federal discretionary funds, the BIL has expanded the suite of discretionary grant programs that states and localities and other entities can apply to for funding for specific projects. The BIL authorized in total approximately $110 billion for these programs. So federal funds that are awarded to MassDOT are reflected in the CIP, including both the federal award and any associated state match. We're also seeing beyond the BIL some changes with respect to toll revenues. For example, we're seeing increased traffic and toll revenues following kind of the slowdown from the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. With these boosted revenues, that's more resources that can support toll facilities such as the Metropolitan Highway System, which includes facilities like the Callahan Tunnel. So this slide here gives an overview of planned spending for the CIP, just to give some cues that tie back to the investment program, or excuse me, the priority areas that I highlighted early in the presentation. Green refers to reliability, blue refers to modernization, and black refers to expansion. There's also some information about the Chapter 90 program for municipalities and funding associated with MassDOT shared services. As I mentioned, the overall CIP, as noted in that bottom right-hand chart, includes about $15.4 billion in planned investments. This is approximately 530 million or so over our existing CIP, which is for years 2023 through 27. In that bottom right-hand pie chart, you can see with the different segments there that approximately 83% of funding and planned investments in the CIP is directed towards reliability or modernization. And then up at the top, you can see kind of organized by MassDOT division information about planned spending. One thing you'll notice is there is spending associated with the MBTA. This is really the state funded investments that support the MBTA for projects such as South Coast Rail. The MBTA does have an independent capital investment plan. They've recently released a draft draft 24 through 28 MBTA CIP for public review, which you can learn more about on the MBTA website. Again, the MassDOT CIP does include a small amount of funding that's reflecting the investments that are state funded for the MBTA, which account for approximately $838 million. So to talk a little bit more, I had mentioned that three-tiered structure of priorities, programs, and projects at the beginning of the presentation. Wanted to talk a little bit more about CIP investment programs that fit within these different priority areas. These are really designed to direct funding to make sure that we're advancing in performance in these different areas. So for example, you can see different programs for each of the different MassDOT divisions in each priority area. So if you look at highway, for example, programs that advance reliability include the bridge program or interstate pavement program and the new resiliency program. Others that support modernization, making things safer, Improving access includes the ADA retrofits program, the Complete Streets program, or the Safe Routes to School program, which is also a new standalone program in the CIP. And then in terms of expansion, you can see example programs like shared use pass and bicycle pedestrian programs that can expand the overall extent of the Commonwealth's bicycle and pedestrian network. So that's just a few examples to give you a flavor. I do want to highlight some CIP programs that are really geared specifically for municipalities and are designed to complement the longstanding Chapter 90 program for state aid for transportation. So examples of some of these other programs include the Shared Streets and Spaces program. You may be familiar with this. It was introduced during the COVID-19 pandemic with the aim of expanding or repurposing sidewalks, curbs, streets, or parking areas to support public health, safe mobility, particularly for cyclists and pedestrians, and renew commerce through activities such as outdoor dining. Other examples, the Local Bottleneck Reduction Program, which helps address bottlenecks at local signalized intersections and to improve traffic flow and movement for all roadway users. Investments through the municipal RTA vehicle fleets, electric vehicle fleets program, supports integrating vehicles and EV equipment in communities. This is an important component, of course, of the Commonwealth's climate stewardship goal. Other examples, the Municipal Small Bridge Program for improving structurally deficient or load-posted bridges between 10 or 20 feet long. So again, a diversity of programs designed to meet the transportation challenges that the Commonwealth's municipalities may be facing. So I want to talk a few minutes about some project highlights in the Boston region for fiscal years 24 through 28. We've got two slides that are organized similarly with projects broken out by division and then location with some project description, spending specifically in the upcoming year, fiscal year 24, spending over the full CIP period of 24 through 28, and then the information about the total project costs. There are a lot of projects in the Boston region. I'm just going to highlight a few on this slide. I'll talk a little bit more in the presentation about how you can explore the full diversity of projects in the CIP. So on the aeronautics side, for example, there's runway reconstruction work planned for the Beverly and Norwood municipal airports. In terms of rail, planned investments in bridge repairs and emplacements on the Framingham secondary rail line. For the transit authorities operating in the Boston region, one example you can see for the Metro West Regional Transit Authority, or MWRTA, some planned investments that will support electric vehicles for their system. And again, another important component to supporting the Commonwealth's climate stewardship goal. Other investments for MWRTA and the Cape and Transportation Authority include replacements of vehicles and facility improvements. One thing I do want to note on this slide, the funding that's shown for the RTAs is specifically the state match. It doesn't include the federal funding that the RTAs receive to direct to these initiatives. So again, highlighting projects within the highway area, which encompasses a lot of different project types. Some examples are bridge improvements. These include the bridge replacements for Route 27 over Route 9 in Natick. You can see other examples, the Storrow Drive over Bowker Ramps project in Boston. You also notice that the Sumner Tunnel investments are included here. Other examples of projects are in the roadway and intersection improvement areas, such as the McGrath Boulevard construction project in Somerville and the rehabilitation of Mount Auburn Street in Watertown. We do have also some examples of bicycle and pedestrian path projects in addition to the complete streets oriented investments that are here. These examples include the Northern Strand Extension Path project in Lynn and the Hunt and the South Medford Connector Bike Path project in Medford. So now I'm just winding down through the presentation. I'd like to talk a little bit about how you can explore more of what's in the CIP. This is the overall structure of our document is highlighted on this slide. The first component is an overview of the CIP and its planned investments. Material is pretty similar to what I'm presenting tonight with a little bit more detail. Appendix A includes the full list of the projects, which you can explore by MassDOT division or by location. This appendix includes a lot of the similar information to what was presented on those project highlight slides I just showed. Appendix B includes some more details specifically about the CIP investment programs, including the amount of spending planned for each over 24 through 28. In terms of our public engagement, we're approaching this in a couple of different ways. One way is the way that we're publishing information about the CIP. So you can review our CIP document as a PDF, but also as a virtual story map, which includes a lot of really cool visualizations that allow you to explore the spending in different areas in more detail as you're interested in doing that. We are holding these 6 regional virtual public meetings in partnership with the metropolitan planning organizations and TPOs. And again, we really appreciate their support in this area. This is the 3rd of those meetings. I'll talk in a minute about some of the other meetings that are coming up. Again, each meeting has very similar content with an overview of the CIP and some region-specific project highlights. One thing I will note is that we do accept comment on any aspect of the CIP, including regardless of region, at any of the meetings. So we definitely encourage folks, they couldn't make it tonight, to join us at another meeting. And of course, the recordings will be posted later on the CIP website. We also have a public comment tool that you can use to comment on specific projects, which I'll talk more about in a minute. So just highlighting our upcoming virtual public meeting schedule. Tonight is the 3rd of the meetings we've been hosting to date. We also have meetings planned for May 31st, covering Southeastern Mass, June 1st, covering Cape and the Islands, and June 5th, covering the Central Mass region. All of these meetings are held at 6 p.m. And you can register for them at mass.gov/CIP. Again, other opportunities. You can comment directly through the CIP comment tool. You can send us an email at masscip@state.ma.us. We also accept physical letters, and at the close of the presentation, I'll share the address for sending us those. We also encourage you to continue to work with your municipal leaders and your local MPO to share your priorities on different types of transportation projects, on an ongoing basis. Specifically for the CIP, our comment period opened on May 18th and closed on June 9th. So again, we'll be collecting feedback through these different venues through June 9th. Just to talk a little bit more about the online comment tool, which you can access through the CIP website. It's also embedded in our story map document as well. So this tool is an interactive map interface. It allows users to filter projects in a couple different ways. You can select them on the map or search by your local highway district, your MPO, different MassDOT divisions you're interested in. You can also search by project number if you have that, or information about the project name or location. You can see kind of in the middle of the screen cap there's a list of projects. As an example, for any project that gets filtered based on the filters you set, you can click more info. That provides more information specifically about the project and its associated CIP spending, and provides an interface where you can provide specific public comment or upvote the project if you're interested in doing that. And again, this resource is going to be available for people to comment through June 9th. So again, the feedback that we receive is really important to development of the current and future CIPs that we work on. This slide highlights a couple of different ways that we use the comment that we receive. So comments that's really specific to projects are shared with project managers and the relevant MassDOT divisions. And then this input is taken into consideration as projects are moved through their development process and are implemented. If you are interested in projects that are not currently in the CIP, we share that information with internal stakeholders as well to share more about who's interested in the project and what that overall level of public interest is. Going up a level to programs and priorities, your feedback on different CIP investment programs that we have, help drive future year investments and help us set priorities for future CIPs. And of course, we appreciate any feedback you have about the CIP development process, the way projects are selected, and how we talk about the CIP, because that helps us work towards developing plans that really reflect the transportation priorities of residents of the Commonwealth. So one other item I do want to highlight tonight, because it will certainly relate to future CIPs, is the development of Beyond Mobility, which is MassDOT's next statewide long-range transportation plan. So this plan will do a couple of things. It will document and account for the most pressing transportation priorities facing Massachusetts between now and 2050, and also actions and guidance that will set the direction of future capital plans and program sizing to make sure that MassDOT is spending funding in ways that improve transportation, that are equitable, and that are aligned with the needs that the public has identified. So this process, which has been going on for over a year now, has involved a lot of public engagement, and there's still more to come. If you're interested in learning more about this plan and how you can get involved, you can visit mass.gov/beyond-mobility or scan the QR code shown on the slide here. And that's a great way to stay up to date and provide input for the upcoming phases of this plan. And I believe with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Chris to facilitate the public comment portion of our meeting. So thanks so much, everyone, for your attention.
Thank you so much, Michelle. To ask a question verbally, you can use the raised hand button and we will unmute you so you may share your question out loud. Please state your name and try to share only one question or comment at a time so everyone has the chance to participate. You can also submit written questions or comments to the host using the chat panel, and we will read them out loud. But we would prefer you to speak with us verbally to have more of a conversation. And to ask a question, if you are here listening over the phone, please dial *9 and we will call out the last 4 digits of your phone number and unmute your audio. And before we begin to call on members of the public, I would like to invite any elected officials that are acting in their official capacity to kick off the comment session if they choose to do so. So I'll give you folks a minute to do so in case there are any representatives with us in the meeting. I'm not seeing anyone. So with that, the floor is open to everyone who would like to ask a comment or question. I see Karen, you have your hand raised. You may unmute yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. This was a great overview and a great understanding of the projects that you have. I am Karen Dumaine with the Neponset Valley Transportation Management Association, TMA, representing Canton, Dedham, Norwood, Westwood, and Foxborough and surrounding towns. One of my questions is how can we move forward the reconfiguration of the Canton interchange, the I-93 Canton interchange for our area. I know that the Dedham Street portion of that project is under, construction. It's getting close to being complete, but the bigger project is the actual straightening of the ramps. And, I just would love to see what would be our next steps. I think there's pockets of money from both federal and, state that I believe should be going towards this project.
Thanks, Karen. I appreciate the feedback. That's as I mentioned, this is definitely, one venue to kind of raise the ongoing interest and advancement concerns around the Cannon Interchange project, and that's information that we can definitely continue to relay to the highway division as they're both advancing the work on the Dedham Street portion and considering other opportunities to advance other portions of the project. So again, we'll definitely pass along the continued interest we've heard tonight to support ongoing work in that area. I know from my experience at the Boston MPO that this has been an ongoing concern for many years. So,
Yeah.
appreciate the ongoing, interest and feedback.
I appreciate that. And especially because, even with the bridges, that need to be, reconfigured and reconstructed, this would be a good time to take advantage of trying to move this project together. So I appreciate your feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question and comment, Karen, and thanks for that response, Michelle. I would also encourage you to contact the Boston MPO staff. I know Ethan's on the call. Always a great option as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. We'd be happy to help in any way we can as far as answering questions. And we do have some communication coming up regarding that project as well.
Thanks, Ethan. Sorry to single you out there. Anyone
Chris,
else?
we received a comment through the chat. I'm not sure if you can see it. If not, I can read it out.
I can't see it for some reason, but you can go ahead if it's okay.
Okay, thanks. So this comment is from Janice Derby, who asked, she's from the engineering industry and is curious whether MassDOT has a public procurement forecast other than the CIP that industry can use to identify what design projects are being procured in advance. Thanks for your question, Janice. To be honest, I'm not really sure that there are other forecasts beyond, other documents that would meet the particular criteria that you're referring to. I don't know if my colleague Derek Cravat is still on the call and might be able to shed any insight.
Yep, thanks, Michelle. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's a great question. I think this is probably one that we'll have to take back to our kind of team in OTP and others in MassDOT, but I'm sure you're familiar with combis. I do know that all procurement opportunities are posted publicly, but we'll be sure to log that and get back to you. But thanks for the comment, and just know that we'll be happy to respond to that.
Thanks for helping answer that question, Derek. And thanks for your comment as well, Janice. If you'd like to elaborate at all, you're also welcome to speak verbally, and I'm happy to unmute you. And if you'd really like to make sure we track that, you're also welcome to provide questions or comments in any of the other formats that Michelle spoke to earlier this evening, either online or via mail. And Michelle, for some reason, I still can't see the chat. So if I do miss a question, feel free to let me know.
I believe that was the only one.
Okay, thank you. Not seeing any raised hands, but again, all this material is available online, and you have plenty of opportunities to comment through the public comment period, which ends on June 9th. So if you need some more time to digest and get back to us with questions and comments, we really encourage you to do so. And anyone else who that might be interested in participating in these meetings, there are 3 more opportunities to do so coming up tomorrow, the following day, and next Monday as well. So we really encourage your participation and welcome all feedback. I'm still not seeing any hands, so I think, Michelle, I will hand it back to you to close out the evening.
Sure, thanks, Chris. So you want to move to the last slide there?
Seems my screen might be frozen because I am on the
Okay,
left.
that's
side
all
of
right.
the- Sorry about that.
No problem. I can recap the points there. They were really kind of mentioning the other the various ways to comment on the CIP. Again, there's the CIP documents, including the story map and other resources are available at the mass.gov/CIP, particularly on the developing the next CIP webpage, which you can navigate to from mass.gov/CIP. This has the documents. It will also have the recordings from these meetings. I believe a copy of this presentation will also be posted there within the next day or two. You can certainly, again, email us masscip@state.ma.us. We definitely encourage you to check out and explore the public comment tool. If you wish to write to us, you can do so at MassDOT, Office of Transportation Planning. Attention, the Manager of Capital Planning at 10 Park Plaza, room 4150 at Boston, Massachusetts, 02116. So again, I want to thank you all for your attention and for your feedback tonight and for your interest in the CIP process. And I hope you all have a great evening. Thanks so much.